All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into something really fascinating about the human mind. It's a process that explains so much about why we believe what we believe and why it's so incredibly hard to change our minds, especially in the polarized world we're all living in. So let's just jump right in with a big question, one that gets to the very heart of this. When we stubbornly stick to our guns, even when there's evidence staring us in the face, is that just our brains being lazy? Are we just taking a mental shortcut? Well, the surprising answer from cognitive science is absolutely not. Actually, it's often the complete opposite. Defending our beliefs, that's hard work. It's a high effort, mentally taxing process that scientists call motivated reasoning. So it's not about being lazy at all. It's about being a really, really dedicated lawyer for our own ideas. So, what exactly is motivated reasoning? Well, it isn't about just ignoring facts completely. It's about how our goals, what we want to be true, end up fundamentally changing the very mental tools we use to think. Our motivations don't just pick the destination, they actually bias the entire roadmap we use to get there. And get this, we have solid evidence that this isn't lazy thinking. Studies have actually shown that when people see information that's endorsed by their own political party, it takes them longer to process it. And that extra time, it's not being spent on some objective, careful analysis. Nope. It's spent building a justification. It's literally the mental work of rationalization happening in real time. So to really wrap our heads around this, the psychologist Ziva Kunda came up with this great idea. She proposed that our brains can operate with two very different goals, which we can think of as two different mindsets. You've got the scientist and you've got the lawyer. Okay, so on one hand, you have the scientist's mindset. The scientist's goal is simple, accuracy. They want to get to the objective truth no matter what it turns out to be. But then, on the other hand, you've got the lawyer. The lawyer's goal is what we call directional. They already have a conclusion in mind, and their entire job is to build the best possible case to defend that conclusion. And this table here illustrates the differences perfectly. The scientist, they're using comprehensive, systematic processing to find the truth. The lawyer, though, does something different. They enhance access to memories and facts that support their case, while at the same time, they actively tear apart any data that contradicts it. It's really the difference between truth-seeking and just plain belief maintenance. All right, so let's peek inside this biased toolkit. How exactly does the lawyer brain work when it feels like a cherished belief is under attack? What are the tools it pulls out? It's basically a three-step process. First, you need a motive. That really uncomfortable feeling you get when you're holding two conflicting ideas. That's cognitive dissonance. Then, a kind of passive filter kicks in called confirmation bias, which makes us notice info that already confirms what we think. But if that's not enough to protect the belief, the brain launches an active, high-effort defense. And that's motivated reasoning. And this active defense is the real key. It's a strategy called selective scrutiny. And you can think of it like this. When we see evidence that supports our views, we just kind of give it a friendly nod and let it right in. But when we see evidence that challenges our views, oh boy, we put on our detective hats, we pull out a magnifying glass, and we search for any tiny possible flaw to completely discredit it. Okay, and this is where things get really, really counterintuitive. You would think, right, that being smarter or more educated would make you less biased. But the research points to this fascinating paradox that has huge, huge consequences for how we talk to each other as a society. Researchers have a name for this, motivated numeracy. And what they found is just wild. People with stronger cognitive skills, like being really good at math, aren't necessarily more objective. Instead, they often use that extra brainpower to become even better lawyers for their side. They're just more skilled at finding the right data and building complex arguments that support what they already believe. And this leads to a pretty startling result, which you can see right here. On these really politically charged topics, the gap in opinion between opposing sides is actually wider among people with high cognitive skills. Think about that. That's because those skills aren't being used to find common ground. They're being used as weapons to build stronger, more convincing justifications for their own team's side. But just when you think you've got it all figured out, some researchers are pushing back. They're asking a really important question about what we're actually observing when we see someone digging in their heels. Is this whole process of defending our beliefs always irrational? I mean, is that intense scrutiny of opposing views always a sign of irrational bias? Or could something else be going on that just looks like bias from the outside? So, this is the whole problem of observational equivalence. The traditional view says, yep, what we're seeing is biased rationalization. Pure and simple. But there's another view, based on a statistical approach called Bayesian reasoning. And this view says, hold on a second, what if this is a perfectly rational person who has a very strong, well-founded belief, a strong prior, and they're just being extra careful before they abandon it? So the crucial point here is that in a lab setting, someone who is irrationally defending a biased belief can look identical to someone who is rationally defending a very strong, well-justified one. They both will spend a ton of time and effort picking apart contradictory evidence. And that forces us to be a little more careful before we just label someone else's thinking as purely irrational. Okay, so if our reasoning is all about our goals, what can we actually do about it? How can we tone down the downsides of that lawyer mindset and maybe encourage our inner scientists to come out and play? Well, the research points to a few key strategies. First, we can try to activate accuracy goals. For example, making people accountable for their reasoning to someone who's neutral. Second, we can de-escalate that feeling of identity threat, by framing information in a way that doesn't feel like a personal attack on someone's tribe. And third, for those times when bias really is just due to lazy thinking, we can just make the data clearer and easier to understand. And all of this really brings us to the ultimate takeaway. Our brains are hardwired to be goal-oriented. We might not be able to just stop them from acting like lawyers, but we do have some control over the cases they're assigned to argue. By consciously trying to shift our goal away from winning the argument and toward finding the truth, we can put all that powerful cognitive machinery to much better use. So, this leaves us with a final thought to carry with us. The next time you feel that little flash of defensiveness when one of your core beliefs gets challenged, just ask yourself, is my brain getting ready for a trial, or is it getting ready for a discovery?